Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero podcast, the show where I cover the least in the best way possible. I'm your host, Jason Wells. Today is May 1st, NFL season. The rosters are shaping up. The draft is done. It was a good one, and I came away with a lot of, and this might have just been because this was a very strong draft class, but I came away with it where a lot of teams didn't really reach. Well, a couple teams did. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I liked a lot of teams' drafts. Like, I just flat out, a lot of teams did really well. I am very excited for this coming season and the second wave of free agency, which we're going to talk also very shortly about. But the new league year is almost here. I'm very excited, but now we are about to hit a dead period, unfortunately, but I'm here to entertain you as best as I can in the weeks to come of the NFL season. This episode, I am talking about, so I'm going to give you my draft winners and losers. As always, we have the NFL Weekly Update. We got some contract extensions, renegotiations. We have some trades. We have kind of the second wave signings, what I was talking about. And there's still a lot of guys left in free agency. A lot of good vets available. Teams will be signing them. We're all waiting for those post June 1st cuts to come in. But I guess let's get right into the NFL Weekly Update to start. Starting off with Travis Kelce renegotiates the final 2 years of his deal. It was reported it was a 2-year extension on top of his 2 years left, but no, I think he just went from 2 years left on his deal at like 30-some million. Now he's at 34 something for the next 2 years, so he becomes the highest paid tight end in the league, as he so deserves. Nothing really to talk about this one. Good for Travis Kelce getting his bag. I will say, though, the Chiefs said, the greatest tight end of all time is, like, staying whatever it was. One, I don't think that he's the best tight end of all time. I think that's Rob Gronkowski, is what it is. Two, I think there's still a debate between Travis Kelce and Tony Gonzalez for the best Chiefs tight end of all time. Now I think Travis Kelce gets the nudge because of the awards, the Super Bowls, it is what it is. But Tony Gonzalez is fucking Tony Gonzalez. Like, Tony Gonzalez still might be higher up in that greatest all-time list instead of Travis Kelce. I don't know if that's really a hot take, but I guess I'm starting this episode off with a hot take right off the bat. Obviously, I love Travis Kelce, but Gronk, Tony Gonzalez, really, 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 really good. Let's keep going. One of my favorite players in the NFL, Lions right tackle Penei Sewell, signed a massive extension, making him the highest paid tackle in the league. 4-year, $112 million deal with $85 million guaranteed. Penei Sewell is incredible. He was incredible at Oregon. He was incredible ever since he's entered the league. He had to switch positions. He was a left tackle his whole life. The Lions draft him. They're like, we have Taylor Decker. Play the right side for us. Build us this tremendous offensive line. And they have. The Lions offensive line, since that pick, have been consistently a top 5 offensive line in the league, you could say, and he is a major reason because of that, and that's why he is now the highest paid tackle in the league. Obviously, there was some debates in his draft year, especially with Bengals fans, of, that classic meme of Joe Burrow getting the ball, no one blocking, and Chase is open, like, waving, but the other one was Burrow back, throwing the ball to T. Higgins with Sewell holding his block and not letting Burrow get sacked. Obviously, the Bengals worked out pretty well with them getting Chase, but their offensive line is still bad. They did pick Amarius Mims. I like the pick, but he's only played in 8 college games. We'll see if he can stay healthy. And I actually didn't get to talk about that in my winners and losers, so hey, I talked about the Bengals now. But yeah, congrats to Penei Sewell. We have another extension. AJ Brown signed a 3-year, $96 million extension, making him the highest paid wide receiver in the league. Did I write that down? Did I talk about Amon-Ra last week? I think I talked about Amon-Ra last week. Either way, AJ Brown, 3-year, $96 million extension. Signed with the Eagles now until 2029. What's there to say? I mean, I did some wide receiver rankings today. AJ Brown, easily a top 10 receiver in the league, debatably top 5. The man is excellent. He's a monster. Good for Philly to lock him up because, again, there's a lot of receivers that still need to get paid. And A.J. Brown, in probably a couple months from now, will no longer be the highest paid guy. But yeah, A.J. Brown, fantastic, staying in Philly. We'll keep going. Christian Barmore, the Patriots defensive tackle, has signed a 4-year, up to $92 million deal. I think 50 of that or 40 something of that was that guaranteed, around that. But that is the biggest deal that the Pats have given out since Tom Brady, which is honestly kind of nuts because the QB numbers would have been depreciated like a decade ago. And also, Tom Brady always took those big discounts. So the fact that they didn't have anyone close to that, but it kind of shows with the way that the Pats roster has gone since Brady because they haven't needed to pay people. And they pay Barmore, they keep one of their own. He is really coming into his own as one of these high-end defensive tackles. If he lives up to that $92 million, that puts him right in that range of that $23 million, what we're seeing all of these other defensive tackles get, other than Christian Wilkins. I'm going to keep harping on that, but I love you, Wilk, but congrats on getting all that money, but goddamn. But yeah, good for Barmore staying there. Now we have our first kind of new signings. So the second wave of free agency, now that the draft is over, teams can reevaluate their boards, and Eagles get Mekhi Becton from the Jets. The Jets cut him, obviously, and now Becton, who we know he's an animal. We know that when he has played, he has looked phenomenal. It's just those injuries. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay in shape? And now he gets to go to the Eagles with one of the best O-lines and one of the best O-line coaches in the league with Jeff Stoutland. I think it's an unbelievable pick. Lane Johnson doesn't have many years left in this league. If you can keep Becton for maybe a couple years after this, I don't know. Maybe it's only a 1-year thing. But yeah, Becton is very, very good. Very good to have as a backup tackle. And hopefully he doesn't have to play with Mailata and Lane Johnson being those tackle guys for the Eagles. We will see, though. Ezekiel Elliott is back to the Dallas Cowboys and basically is their number one running back. Cowboys did not address that in the draft. And it's kind of fitting because at least the Cowboys are still paying off that big contract that they gave him before they cut him last offseason. Yeah. Cowboys, I don't know what they're doing. It seems to me like they are quiet quitting. You know, they brought back McCarthy. They're kind of just running it back. They don't really seem to want to extend Dak. CD still needs to get extended. I think they're just going to run the course this season. Didn't really make any upgrades. They might they're quiet quitting. It is what it is. But yeah, Zeke back to the Cowboys. Sure, he's their number one instead of Rico Dowdle now or Deuce Vaughn. But Zeke back to the Cowboys. We had a trade. The Broncos traded a 2026 6th-round pick for Jonathan Franklin Myers of the Jets. It really just got to be that there was too many edge players for the Jets, and they just needed to move on from someone. They traded for Reddick, and then they drafted Jermaine Johnson 2 years ago and Will McDonald last year. Franklin Myers was just making a little too much money. Now he goes to the Broncos. Good pickup for the Broncos. It is a 2026 pick, but good pickup nonetheless. we have a veteran move here. So Jarvis Landry, who hasn't played in the NFL for I think the last couple seasons, is eyeing a comeback now. He is going to report to the Jags rookie minicamp, see if the old vet can really like still play against these guys coming into the league, and a lot of these guys won't make the league. So Juice should be able to show out. We'll see if that becomes anything. I mean, obviously, there's a reason he hasn't played for the last 2 years, but if he's feeling healthy, he's feeling good. He's still only 31, I believe. So we'll see if Landry can make a comeback there back in Florida. And then, yeah, we get some unfortunate news. Wide receiver or Texans wide receiver Tank Dell was shot in a nightclub. He's okay. It was just a graze. It was just a flesh wound. But yeah, again, things that just shouldn't be happening. This is now back-to-back off seasons where an NFL player has got shot and been okay. Thankfully, last year with Brian Robinson, obviously. The States is just insane. I don't know how else to put it. The States is a crazy, crazy place, and I think a 16-year-old was the one who shot the gun too. A 16-year-old at a nightclub shot a gun. I think multiple people got injured, Tank Dell being one of them. Sad. Very sad. On to a bit of a lighter note, though. Reggie Bush, this isn't really NFL related, but former NFL running back Reggie Bush gets his Heisman back. So if you don't know Reggie Bush, they took his Heisman away because he took money from boosters and mainly just boosters. And if that confuses you, then you should be confused because yes, that's exactly what NIL is now, is just boosters giving players money to come to your school. And that's what Reggie Bush did. Was it illegal 20 years ago? It was. Were there a lot of other players doing it? There were. But Reggie Bush unfortunately got caught and they took away his Heisman, even though it had nothing to do with his on-field play. And it took them way too long for them to give, because I understand taking the Heisman away, but now that we're into this more modern era of it should have been immediate almost, Reggie gets his Heisman back. He never should have given it back in the first place. Like, I just would have kept that and been like, no, you can fuck off. Yeah, good for Reggie. Ended up having a pretty decent NFL career. Went to the Saints, went to the Dolphins, went to the Lions. Wasn't obviously like the Reggie Bush people thought he was going to be from college, but good player. Good player anyways. Maybe he makes my Hall of Very good. I doubt it, but we'll keep going. Couple NFL notes here. Roger Goodell said on the Pat McAfee show that he is aiming for an 18-week NFL season. It would only be 2 preseason games. There would be 2 bye weeks. And I think that would make it so it would push the Super Bowl week onto that 3-day weekend, which I don't know what it is. I think it's President's Day in the States, and it's Family Day for us here in Canada, but it would push it so that Super Bowl Sunday, everyone has that Monday off, which is amazing. I would absolutely love that. Obviously, it's more football. More football, the better, in my opinion, but we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, it's a long ways away. The NFLPA has to agree to it. That probably won't come up until the next bargaining agreements anyways. So, but that's obviously the goal. I think the players getting a second bye week is ideal, honestly. Like, I think 17 games and only 1 bye week is crazy. 18 games, you get an extra week of rest. That balances out it more, in my opinion. Still a lot, obviously, but yeah. And last note here, NFL players are now allowed to wear those scrum caps over their helmet. Obviously, they're not scrum caps, but if you played rugby or you know what rugby is, you know what I'm talking about, where it's basically this foam thing that goes on top of your head, because rugby players don't wear helmets, so they wear this thing, but now NFL players are wearing helmets, and also this foam thing over their helmets. It's not like... It's optional, so not everyone's going to do it. I don't know how many players are going to do it. I would think a lot of offensive linemen would do it because they literally bang heads every single snap almost, offensive and defensive linemen. We'll see. Obviously, the helmets, they look clean, they look nice, and having this foam little bumpy thing painted in the team's colors will look a little weird, but I mean, for the sake of safety, like, go for it. Yeah, that'll do it for the NFL Weekly Update. Winners and losers time for the NFL Draft now. Okay, NFL Draft winners and losers time, and I guess before I really start getting into it here, this was a very good draft, and I think a lot of teams succeeded in what they wanted to do with their draft classes. And honestly, it was tough for me to find five winners because I liked a lot. And on the inverse, there weren't a lot of classes I disliked. You'll see with the loser stuff, I played around. I was a little more creative with it than just straight up losers. And yeah, so I guess we'll start off with the winners. And like I was just saying, a lot of teams draft classes that I liked. And teams like the Bills with Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, Spencer Van Prague, I think the Georgia center or whatever. The Niners, you can talk about Pearsall or whatever. I think he fits what they do. They drafted Isaac Garendo, who again fits that system perfectly. Dominic Pooney, the guard out of Kansas. The Saints, Tali Fuaga, they drafted Christian Boyd, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Spencer Rattler, coming for Derek Carr's job now. The Rams, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Blake Corum. The Colts, Leatu Latu and A.D. Mitchell. Chargers, Joe Walt, Lad McConkey, and Junior Colson. Even the Patriots, Drake May, and then they got, I think it was like Caden Wilson, who's from Penn State, the other tackle there, and also ended up with Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. It might have been Jalen McMillan. One of the Washington receivers. I don't have it in front of me right now. The Packers, who did they get? Jordan Morgan, Edge Cooper, Marshawn Lloyd, and they drafted someone else I like who I can't remember off the top of my head. The Eagles, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, then they added a 6'7" receiver in Johnny Wilson. That's not bad. And like the Bears, Caleb Williams, awesome. Rome Odunze, awesome. Didn't have a lot of picks. They drafted a punter. They also drafted Austin Booker, who high upside guy, one of the guys who I talked about as one of the people to watch the combine anyways. But those guys, like they all had good draft classes, and I'll add the Dolphins in there. I'm going to talk about the Dolphins at the end of this because obviously I got to talk about more in detail about my team. But yeah, let's start off with number 5 for my winners, and it is the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens have had a philosophy ever since that they have been a franchise, and that is draft best player available. Like, obviously, you got to fit need and whatever, but take the best players every single time. And that's really what they did. They drafted Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. Their corner room is already pretty solid right now, but it's getting older. Nate Wiggins is a guy who I don't know if he's going to start for them immediately, but high upside guy for them. Roger Rosengarten out of Washington should be able to fight for a tackle spot for them. And again, offensive line is always a need. Adisa Isaac, the other edge out of Penn State. Again, what Baltimore likes to do is they like to rotate in those defensive line guys. They just get another one with Isaac now. Tez Walker out of North Carolina. Good size, he's fast. Good, again, it's a good wide receiver option. Fell a little later, and then another guy that fell later for them was TJ Tampa, the corner out of Iowa State. Was getting some potential late round 1 buzz, like round 2 buzz, and he fell all the way to the 4th. And obviously for good reasons. If people fall, like there are reasons for them to fall, and obviously the draft buzz doesn't really mean a lot, but getting a guy who many people thought could have been a early day 2 pick, and he goes at the start of day 3. That's the Ravens finding value, and that's just what they do, and that's why they come in at number 5 for me here. At number 4, we get the Cardinals. Obviously, they started it off with Marvin Harrison Jr. We all know how I feel about Marv. Marv is excellent. Kyler gets his number 1. I thought that was a pick that they were going to make basically throughout the entire process, and they did. At pick 27, they picked Darius Robinson, the versatile defensive lineman out of Missouri. He can play edge, he can play defensive line, but Jonathan Gannon now kind of gets a chess piece for that defensive line and someone who has the motor and has the tenacity to be able to play across that line. And I'm sure that Gannon appreciates that versatility in a defender. And then they came back on day two and they drafted running back Trey Benson. Obviously, they have James Conner. Trey Benson was my number one running back. I think that he can be a workhorse. Obviously, James Conner's there, but now they have a very, very good 1-2 punch. They drafted Max Melton out of Rutgers. Athletic corner, more of like I think he will try to start for them, or Gannon will try to push for him to start. They're obviously weaker at corner, but Melton is some guy who projects with a somewhat starter upside, anyways. And who else did I have down for them here? And Dadrian Taylor Demerson, or Jack Rabbit Taylor, out of the safety out of Texas Tech. He went on day 3, and again, this is one of the players who a lot of draft pundits talked about a lot in this safety class. Another versatile player. He is relentless, and I think Jonathan Gannon kind of got the guys to fit his defense, worked well with Monty Ossenfort, and I think they just kind of nailed this process in general. I'm excited to see how the Cardinals look next year. I don't think I'm projecting playoffs for them, but I think that they will push around 500. I think that they will be a tough team to beat here in year 2 of the Jonathan Gannon era Cardinals. At number 3, I have the Carolina Panthers, and I got the Panthers number 3 mainly because they saw what they did to Bryce Young last year. Absolutely atrocious, horrendous. They put the rookie first overall QB in one of the worst spots imaginable. And they went out and they sought out to fix that in this draft by getting guys like Xavier Leggett, Jordan Brooks, and Jatavian Sanders. That's a wide receiver, a running back, and a tight end, all for Bryce Young to work with. We'll start off with Leggett. We all know I absolutely love Xavier Leggett. He ended up being my number 5 wide receiver in this class. I think my number 20 or 21st overall player. So top 25 player for me. And just his voice, like his southern drawl country kid, like it's amazing to hear. He seems like a very good person. And I think that he does have wide receiver 1 upside. So now Bryce is throwing to Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and now Xavier Leggett can hopefully develop into something great for Bryce Young. And they also added another pass catcher with Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. Throughout a lot of the process, he was talked about as being the second tight end to Brock Bowers here. But he didn't test too great. And he's not a great blocker, but he is an athlete with the ball in his hands. And I don't even know who the Panthers had at tight end, but now Sanders goes in, I think, relatively. Again, it's a pass catcher. It's another weapon for Bryce. And then they add Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas, who absolutely crushed it last season for Texas. And that was 1 year after no Bijan Robinson, no Roschon Johnson. It was Jonathan Brooks' backfield, and he took every advantage he wanted, realistically. It was, yeah. Jonathan Brooks probably would have gone a little earlier, but he tore his ACL, so he missed most of the process. But yeah, the Panthers have surrounded Bryce Young with quality, good players to be like, okay, we fucked up last year. Go prove that we were right of making you and trading up for you of the first overall pick. They also drafted Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky, the linebacker, so they do get another defender. And with all of these drafts, I should have mentioned these aren't their complete drafts, but these are the players that I like that they draft. Just to clarify here. Yeah, at number 2, I have the Detroit Lions, the team hosting the draft this year. Yeah, I thought that they crushed it. Their number 1 need to me was corner, and they not only addressed that, they addressed it twice early in the draft with Tyrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. Arnold out of Alabama, Rakestraw out of Missouri. Yeah, Tyrion Arnold, some have as the number one corner in the draft. I thought he was very, very good. He's very smart. Dan Campbell loves his smart players. And he just kind of fell. I haven't mentioned it yet, but there was, I mean, I probably did a little behind the scenes curtain peek here. I'm recording this on a Monday. I usually record on Tuesday, so I haven't done my NFL weekly update or the intro for the show yet. And I probably should mention that, yeah, like the 15 defenders. So there was a slide in the draft, and there's a reason why Tyrion Arnold fell to 29. Does that sound right? I think that sounds right. Fell to 29 in the draft because took until the 15th pick for the first defender to come off the board. So the Lions really lucked out. Then they double dipped with Rakestraw, who some thought as, oh, could he sneak into day one, early day two? He fell. But yeah, now the secondary that was kind of looking like a weakness for the Lions is now looking like a relative strength, anyways, especially if Arnold is legit. The other picks that I like that they made, they added more depth to their offensive line here. They drafted Christian Mahogany out of Boston College. Developmental guard, but again, could be a potential starter down the line. And then they drafted Giovanni Manu out of British Columbia, Canada. He is an absolute monster. I think that I should have actually had it down in front of me. I think he's 6'8", 355, but he ran a 4.88 40. So the size and the athleticism, it is wow, it is there. And now he is with this great Lions offensive line. Some people see it as a reach. It's obviously a project. This is kind of like a Jordan Mailata type thing, not to the same extent because at least Manu's played football, although albeit Canadian football, not the same thing really. But yeah, the Lions drafted this absolute mammoth of a man to hopefully develop into another tackle for them. And then the other pick that they made that I liked was Makai Wingo out of LSU. One of the defensive players on that LSU defensive line, along with Mason Smith and Jordan Jefferson. Wingo was the last one to go. I liked his teammate Mason Smith just a little more. He ended up being in my top 50. I didn't go into my top 100 because I was a little bit lazy, but I think that Wingo would have been in my top 75 players, though, and they got him late. And now you're looking at a defensive line or interior defensive line with Wingo. They got DJ Reader in there, and they got Aleem McNeil. That's nice. Yeah, this I think the Lions killed it. They've killed it the last 2 years. Brad Holmes continues to be a great, great GM for the Lions and are setting them up very, very nicely. And at number one, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers picked at number 20 in this draft. The Dolphins picked at number 21. And it basically seemed like every single time the Steelers came up on the board, it was a player that I really wanted and Dolphins Twitter really, really wanted. And every single time the Steelers took that player that we wanted. And they absolutely crushed it. So they got Troy Fotano in the first round, Zach Frazier early day two. Then they drafted wide receiver Roman Wilson out of Michigan. They drafted Peyton Wilson out of NC State, and then Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State. So they added 3 linemen. I'm sure they'll probably try to put Fotanu at left tackle, start him there. Zach Frazier might be their starting center now, but will definitely play interior offensive line. Mason McCormick can play center, can play guard, but they got 3 people in my mind who should be starters in this league. I think Fotano will be a very high end starters in this league, but they basically upgraded their entire offensive line in basically 2 off seasons, and I really, really like it now. With the other 2 picks, Roman Wilson, I was higher on Roman Wilson than I think most draft guys, and I think the big reason is kind of the reason why people liked the flashes of J.J. McCarthy is because you saw what he could do. It was very, very, very limited, but it was kind of the same thing with Roman Wilson. If J.J. McCarthy's only making these throws a few times a game, that means Roman Wilson only gets half of those opportunities because there's still other guys to feed the ball to. But he flashed when it mattered, and I think he has good speed, decent size. Pair him with George Pickens. I think that's a nice little duo. I think like It would be tough going into the season with Roman Wilson as your wide receiver too, but I think he can develop into something nicely, and who knows, he might be a good starter out the gate. And the other linebacker, or the other player, the linebacker they got, Peyton Wilson out of NC State, athletic, very very athletic, very fast. His just issue is he doesn't really have ACLs in his knee anymore, which he can play on that right now. It's been good, but his longevity for his career is kind of in question. But hey, if the Steelers can get a player for 3, 4 years and that's it, like that's just kind of the way of the NFL. But I think Peyton Wilson can be a good linebacker for them, even if it will be a short amount of time. Yeah, so those are my 5 winners there. The Ravens, the Cardinals, the Panthers, the Lions, and the Steelers. And because I'm not going to talk about the loser talk, then talk about the Dolphins, I'm going to talk about the Dolphins now. Because in my opinion, the Dolphins did win the draft. It was I wouldn't say a tough 2 days, but the start of the draft for the Dolphins drafted Chop Robinson, the edge out of Penn State, and then Patrick Paul, the tackle out of Texas Tech, or was it Houston? I should know that. It's one of the red Texas college schools, and I'll just leave it at that. I think it's Houston. But those 2 picks happened, and those are 2 players who I like, and I like the upside. And Chop, people calling Chop a project. He's a little bit more of a project than you would have had those first 3 edge guys, but he's still a very high level player, and he has elite speed and get off for an edge player. And that's not even like, oh, in college and like like his measurables and his 10-yard split and his 40-yard dash is the elite of the elite in the NFL for top end speed. And we don't have to really rely on him much this first season. I think he will get a lot of snaps early on with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb both coming back from their injuries, but we also got Shaq Barrett there. So yeah, it's a pick more or less for the future. And it's the same thing with Patrick Paul. I don't think he's going to start much at guard, but Teron Armstead is unfortunately a Band-Aid. I think he's got 1 year left on his career, and he has been a Band-Aid for much of his career. It's not an insult, it is what it is. But with that, we need a succession plan at left tackle. Patrick Paul is someone who he even said it. He met with Mike McDaniel, he met with Butch Berry, and he wanted to work with these guys. And I think he has all of the intangibles and the willingness to work hard and work on his craft where there's no pressure for him to start early. Obviously, if Armstead goes down, we hope that he is ready when the time comes, but he is someone who's willing to learn and has the size profile and the athleticism that should make him translate to a good NFL tackle. But again, these are picks that they won't benefit the team immediately. Whereas day three is where the Dolphins really, really crushed the draft. We started with drafting running back Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, ran a 4.38, very good in pass protection. Mostert's obviously getting a little older. He just signed that contract extension, but McDaniel loves running 2 running backs on the field. We got Mostert and A-Chain. Now we get Jalen Wright, who basically fits that exact profile of what McDaniel wants to do. And we can have a rotation. If someone gets hurt, boom, we still got these other 2 guys. Like, it's nice to have that plan in place. We drafted Mo Camara out of Colorado State. That just improves that edge rotation. We've seen what Weaver wants to do. We now have, I don't know how many defensive end or edge players and defensive tackles we have, like interior defensive line guys. Like, there is a lot right now on the roster, and they will obviously have to cut that down. But Weaver has a lot of pieces to play around with there, and I love that. They also drafted Patrick McMorris, safety. I have no idea who that is. That was like the one player I'm like, sure, whatever, fine. Then we drafted Taj Washington out of USC. I actually thought he was a better player than Brandon Rice. Oh, we also drafted Malik Washington out of West Virginia. Smaller player, but a yak threat with the ball in his hands, and that's what McDaniel loves to do. Which actually isn't true. We throw the ball deep, but we need a guy in the slot to get the ball in his hands and to be able to make plays. We just need more playmakers. We added more playmakers. People were mad about not adding offensive line, like interior offensive line depth, but I think that we still got two moves left. I think we're going to add a wide receiver three. I think we're going to add some interior offensive line depth. It wouldn't shock me if Connor Williams comes back. I'm just going to throw that one out there. Would not shock me if he is back. But I think the Dolphins draft class, I think that they did very good. But it is a draft class where it's clearly, don't worry about this year. I think the team is very, very good this year. And I think that this draft, if a few of these guys hit the way that they're supposed to, we are building for that next year to be like, because we're going to have a lot of draft picks next year too, with those comp picks coming in. And hopefully these guys are be like, okay, there are starters after these older guys retire. We free up some cap space. I didn't think I mentioned it, but Bradley Chubb has an out in his contract. So if Chop Robinson is that guy, okay, Bradley, you're out the door. Chop, you're starting opposite Jalen Phillips. Like, there's a plan. There's a plan here. I see the plan in my head. It just needs to come to fruition. I really like this draft class. And don't let anyone tell you differently. This was a good Dolphins draft class. Okay, let's talk about the losers of the draft. And I said at kind of the top that this was hard to find real losers of this draft. Now, I definitely have a couple. Don't you worry about that. But I did have to get creative. And when I say losers of this draft, because this is what pissed me off about a lot of Dolphins and draft Twitter too, where fans immediately are being like, that's a bad pick. I can't believe, fire the GM. Before these like kids have actually played an NFL practice, let alone an NFL snap in a game, but before they've even got into the practice facilities, put the pads on, fans are already being like, that was a bad pick, that player's a bust, blah, blah, blah. Like, just be a little optimistic. Like, it's not hard. I don't know why it's so doom and gloom for some people, and it's always, oh, this team sucks. Like, show a little pride in your fandom and being like, okay, yeah, these young 20-year-old kids, like, let's prop them up here instead of, like, knocking them down literally the minute they get picked. It's very sad, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm going to rationalize kind of what I said, but yeah, there's no real draft losers because you look at some of these draft grades, like, they're ridiculous. They mean absolutely nothing because whatever. I'm getting too far into it. Let's start off with my number 5 loser of the draft week. It is other North American sports fans. So that is hockey fans, that is basketball fans, that is baseball fans. The NFL is king and will always be king now with viewership. So the first round of the NFL draft averaged 12.1 million viewers. That is more viewers than all 2023 World Series games, all 2023 Stanley Cup Finals games, 4 of the 5 NBA Finals games, and every 2023 college football regular season game but one. The NFL is king, and there was a lot of, oh, the NBA is better. They have more more followers on Instagram. Doesn't matter. There are always more eyes on the NFL. More people watch the NFL draft. I just said it. More people watched the NFL draft than the NBA Finals last year. The NFL is king, and that's why every other fan of North American sports has taken the L on this one. This is what I meant when I had to get creative, by the way, is that's my number 5 loser. My number 4 loser here is Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. And it's honestly not what you think. Besides J.J. McCarthy, the player, I'm not even going to talk about J.J. McCarthy, the player, but I will talk about this Vikings draft class quickly. They got J.J. McCarthy at number 10, which is good value, where a lot of people had them trading up, and it's a good thing that they didn't because that would have been a waste or a mismanagement of assets to trade up for a guy of J.J. McCarthy's caliber. But now J.J. McCarthy is in Minnesota with a very good offensive around him, with Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, who likes using QBs like J.J.'s, or who have J.J.'s profile to them and what they can do on the field. So the Vikings getting J.J. was an absolute fit. The reason why J.J. McCarthy is the loser on draft night is, well, one, People projected him to go into the top 5, which has a lot more money guaranteed and built in than someone who was picked at 10. But obviously, he's still making millions of dollars, so who really cares? But no, the reason why J.J. McCarthy was the loser of draft night is he had 2 very bad visuals, unfortunately. One of them, there was a picture taken of him with his Vikings hat on, with his suit looking a little oversized, a little wrinkled, and the caption on Twitter for the picture was, "It looks like JJ McCarthy just threw up and like is looking to tell his mom about it," kind of thing. Like that's how he looked. He looked like a literal child. So bad visual number 1. Bad visual number 2 is he had his phone is flipped and being like, boom, skull, happy to be a part of Vikings family, like let's get this thing going, blah blah blah. But for whatever reason, his lips were like bright pink. And that's fine. You want to wear lipstick as a man? I don't give a shit. You go ahead. But to me, and I'm going to make a Monsters Inc. reference here. Do you guys remember in the movie? So there was Randall, that purple monster dude, and he had his little sidekick with him. So that sidekick's name was Fungus. And if you remember, Fungus got swapped into the Scream Machine extractor, and it made him all white, and it gave him the big pink lips. That's what J.J. McCarthy reminded me of. He reminded me of Fungus from Monsters, Inc. Ridiculous, I know, but again, I had to get creative with my draft losers because I didn't think that there was a lot of them this year. But J.J. McCarthy is my draft loser for the 2 bad visuals. I do think he is in a very, very good situation, and I think that he has a chance to reach his ceiling. And again, his ceiling for me is a fringe top 10 quarterback, but that is a starting quarterback in the league. So nothing but the best for JJ. Also, them getting Dallas Turner, absolute win. Just had to add that too. Let's keep moving on here. My number 3 draft loser is tight end Michael Mayer. So, Michael Mayer, if you don't know the name, he was the 35th overall pick for the Raiders in the 2023 draft. So, tight end out of Notre Dame, it was between him and Kincaid, which tight end was going to get picked. Kincaid went in the round 1. Mayer went early round 2, and here we are. And then on Thursday night, the Raiders on the clock at 13. They obviously clearly just went best player available, and they took Brock Bowers at that pick. Kind of shocking, obviously, because the investment they just put in Michael Mayer. But Brock Bowers is phenomenal. I love Brock Bowers. He is going to be a very, very, very good tight end in this league, and kind of just seemingly stole Michael Mayer's job. Now, I have no idea what the Raiders' plan is for him. They brought in their new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy. Didn't do that great in Chicago, and I don't know if he has a plan where he's going to run this 2 tight end system with Bowers and Mayer, and they're going to be the new Gronk and Hernandez or whatever. I have no idea. Maybe that's the plan, but to me, it looks like a lot of GMs are probably calling the Raiders to be like, hey, what do you want for Michael Mayer right now? Team like the Dolphins, I wouldn't be opposed to making that call. Because he didn't have, and again, it's hard for rookie tight ends to be productive. Weird to say when Sam Laporta just had the season that he had, but Mayer only had, I think it was 27 catches, 304 yards, and 2 TDs. But now he's tight end number 2 on his team, which sucks for him. Maybe he gets traded in these next couple months. I have no idea, but Michael Mayer is my number 3 loser for this NFL draft. At number 2 here, we start actually getting into some actual takes here, but we have Denver Broncos fans. Not the Denver Broncos in general, but just Denver Broncos fans, because in a span of a week, you went from hoping and, oh God, we have a new jersey unveiling coming soon. Then it's the NFL draft. Like, yeah, things are on the up. Then the jerseys got unveiled. They were ass. And then the draft happened, and they drafted Bo Nix at number 12. And here's Sean Payton on the podium after being like, "Oh, we fleeced the Vikings into trading up one spot because we always wanted Bo Nix, and we knew that they were going to take JJ. We were never ha 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 ha. We got him. You drafted Bo Nix at goddamn number 12. I'm speechless. I honestly thought that only four QBs were going in round one. We'll talk about the other one next. Spoiler, but Bo Nix, man, I just don't see it. And he is a QB that Sean Payton, he does the things that Sean Payton wants, and he can read the field and blah blah blah. But taking a super senior who had like really this was his like last year at Oregon was good for him. His 3 years at Auburn before that were not good. And then he had this really, really good season this year at Oregon. Like 77% of his passing completions, like that's fantastic. But I think it was Dan Orlovsky compared him to like maybe being Andy Dalton. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, maybe being Andy Dalton, where, yeah, I can see that. I can see that being Bo Nix's absolute ceiling is Andy Dalton. And that's not a bad thing. Andy Dalton had a very good, long, productive career. Still might be hanging around as a backup, maybe, I think. Which, that's not a bad thing. But taking a guy who, yeah, his ceiling could be that. I think that Bo Nix is just career backup. He's fine, whatever. Like, he could be Andy Dalton. At number 12, that's just insane to me, but it is such a quarterback league where teams will just take shots on quarterbacks until they eventually find one. But Bo Nix at 12 just isn't it. And there's a reason why it's Broncos fans, because I don't think the Broncos really had necessarily that bad of a draft. They drafted Jonah Ellis, the edge, out of Utah in round 3. It's a fine pick. And they drafted Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's running mate at Oregon at the start of round 4. And I'm not a fan of Troy Franklin. I don't like him as a receiver, but I didn't like him there was talks about him late round 1 or early day 2. I didn't like him as a day 1 or day 2 player. You're telling me that they can pair him back up with Bo Nix at the start of day 3? Like, that's a win. I'm not a fan of Troy Franklin, but getting him at the start of the 4th round compared to getting him at the start of the 2nd round, that's a massive win for me. But yeah, the loser is Broncos fans because you had a bunch of hope. You thought that the throwbacks might have been the permanent jerseys. You thought that you might have had a real chance of getting a blue chip player or maybe trading up for a real quarterback. And no, you end up with the guy who should be a career backup and is now your QB room is looking like Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, and Ben DiNucci. Dog water. That is all I can say. And finally, my number 1 loser of the draft is the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know what you were doing, why you would possibly pay Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed and then take a 24-year-old quarterback at pick number 8. I just don't understand it whatsoever. And it's not even all about the Michael Penix pick. It's also taking Rook Orororo at the start of the 2nd round too, where I like Rook as a player. He hasn't played a ton of football. I think like he was born in Nigeria, came over. I think he's only been playing football 5 or 6 years. Like the potential is there, and pairing him with Grady Jarrett, like to learn from, I absolutely love that. But Johnny Newton was still on the board. And I know the Falcons absolutely fell in love with Penix, and it is what it is, but you're asking. So Cousins is obviously starting for the next 2 years. Then there's an out on his contract, and then we'll see. So you're going to then ask a 26-year-old Michael Penix to finally start in the NFL, who there's already a bunch of question marks around him. So if he ends up being great, then everything's wrong and who cares, but blah, blah, blah. But they called Kirk Cousins 3 minutes before they made the pick to be like, hey, we're taking a quarterback. Like they absolutely blindsided Kirk. And I think the story might have been that they called Kirk to be like, hey, we might be taking a quarterback today, just so you know. And Kirk's like, oh, okay, appreciate the heads up. And then literally with the first round pick, they took a quarterback. There's a lot of scenarios in my head where this really isn't even about Michael Penix. It's the Falcons organization as a whole, where I don't understand paying all that money for Kirk, who you know will be a solid, above average starter for your team, when, like, again, yeah, you won't pick in the top 10, but to me, the Falcons were in such a trade down spot where teams probably wanted to jump the Bears for, so they wouldn't grab Odunze, and they could, where if they would trade down into the like, so what I had, let's say, with the Jags trade up to number 8, the Falcons trade up or trade back, the Falcons could have ended up with Dallas Turner and Johnny Newton and an extra first round pick for next year. Like the team building and the roster construction that Terry Fontenot, the Falcons GM, could have done for this team is crazy. And I think that he did it a massive disservice for taking Michael Penix. And again, that has nothing to do with Michael Penix as the player. He could work out, it could be all fine, but just the overall process of paying Kirk Cousins all of that money and then having a top 10 pick and kind of just wasting it, like for something to use 2 years down the line, where that's a job losing move to me, in my opinion. Where if Michael Penix isn't that guy, Arthur Blank will look, and especially if the Falcons don't have like real success this season, where I'm sure that Arthur Blank's looking at him to be like, really? You could have had a chance at a premier defensive player, another premier offensive player in this draft, and you chose to go to play a guy who, for a minimum, won't play until 2026. And who knows? Kirk could still be good in another 2 years. They still keep him around because QB money's only going to go up. Kirk still has his contract. And I don't know, maybe we don't see Michael Penix till he's 28. Wouldn't that be fucking crazy? Yeah. And then yeah, for the Falcons for the rest of the draft, I'm not a fan of the Rook pick, mainly just because Johnny Newton was on the board, and I think he's the better defensive tackle player. I like the potential for Rook, I get it, but again, it still seemed very, very early. And then they tapered off, they mellowed out a little bit. They followed the Rook pick up with Braylon Trice, the edge out of Washington, and then Brandon Dorless, who I really liked out of Oregon, to try to bolster that defensive line. Yeah. Again, we'll see. Maybe Michael Penix proves everyone wrong and blah, blah, blah. But it was just such a future pick when I think that the Falcons had a real chance to make a push for a playoff spot with a real defender in this class. And I don't know. Again, it's a massive hypothetical, but if they had an opportunity to trade down in this class, acquire future picks for next year, and like grab, like they could have had the first defender off the board at pick 14, which is crazy because a lot of teams expected them to take the first edge off the board with Turner or Latu or whoever. I don't know. It's a tough pill to swallow if I'm a Falcons fan. Thankfully, I'm not. But yeah, that move would have pissed me off to no ends, if I'm being honest. So yeah, the losers of my draft were every other North American sports fan, JJ McCarthy, Michael Mayer, Broncos fans, and the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, that'll do it for my draft recap. Uh, yeah, I don't. I think I'm done. I think that might be it. Yeah, the NFL season's basically officially here. I got to figure out what kind of shows I'm going to do for the next couple weeks. Obviously, I got the Hall of Very Good. That'll take up a decent amount of my time, or a decent amount of time weeks. So basically, I have to push to July, and then I can start doing my divisional previews, stuff like that. I got to do an episode with my friend Brian. That's just going to be goofy football talk. I'll probably get into some player rankings, to go into the season. But as always, if you have liked this, please like, share, retweet, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And until next time, peace.